Shall I start?
Yes, Zubia.
Namaste and greetings. I, Zubia Moin, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav एवं नीति अनुसंधान संस्थान नई दिल्ली, extend my warmest welcome to you all at IMPRI #Web Policy Talk. Today, we are gathered for a special talk on the topic, a pragmatic approach to gender responsive budgeting, experience of Kerala by Dr. Mridul Eapen. This deliberation is a part of the State of Gender Equality #Gender Gaps series, which is organized by the IMPRI Gender Impact Studies Center. As the chair for the session, we have Professor Vibhuti Patel, visiting distinguished professor at IMPRI and GISC, former professor, Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai. We welcome you, ma'am. With permission of chair, I would like to introduce the gathering.
Please go ahead, Zubia, introduce the panelists.
Thank you, ma'am. We are elated to welcome our distinguished speaker, Dr. Mridul Eapen. Professor Mridul Eapen is a former board of the Kerala State Planning Board. She's also an honorary fellow, Center for Development Studies, Trivandrum. We welcome you, ma'am. We are also joined by esteemed discussants. First, we'd like to welcome Professor Mini Sukumar, member, Kerala State Planning Board. We welcome you, ma'am. Professor Suchita Krishnaprasad, former head of Economics Department, Elphinstone College, Dr. Homi Bhabha State University, Mumbai. We'd also welcome you, ma'am. Dr. Sanghamitra Dhar, Technical Coordinator, States, Gender Responsive Budgeting, UN Women. Welcome, ma'am. Professor Ishita Mukhopadhyay, Professor, Department of Economics and former Director, Women's Studies Research Center, University of Calcutta. A very warm welcome to all of you. Now, I invite our chair, Professor Vibhuti Patel, to initiate the deliberation with her opening remarks, invite our esteemed speaker, and to proceed further. We look forward to learning from the esteemed gathering. Thank you.
Today's esteemed speaker, Dr. Mridul Eapen, and the discussants, Professor Ishita Mukhopadhyay, Professor Minik Sukumar, Dr. Sanghamitra Dhar, and Dr. Suchita Krishnaprasad. Good evening. And I would first of all like to express my heartfelt thanks to Dr. Arjun Kumar and Zubia for providing this platform for this special talk on pragmatic response to gender responsive budgeting, experiences of Kerala. Now, concept of GRB, gender responsive budgeting, gained widespread popularity during the later part of 1980s when women's movement and gender economists started pressurizing the nation states to translate gender commitments into budgetary commitments so that the funds, functions, and functionaries could be assigned for programs and schemes to reduce gender gaps in crucial areas of health, education, employment, skill building, decision making, and to combat gender-based violence. Currently, 84 countries have adopted some variant of gender budgeting, and the UN Women has played pivotal role in capacity building of the state and non-state actors in GRB processes at national and subnational level. Women Empowerment Policy 2001 had recommended gender audit of budgets. GRB got official stamp in 2005 with government ruling GR from the Ministry of Finance that was sent to all states and union territories aimed at empowerment of women through higher and more gender-focused government expenditure. This initiated process of subnational level gender responsive budgeting, though the Ministry of Women and Child Development formed in through the Ministry of Women and Child Development, which was formed in 2006, became the nodal agency to implement GRB in India. It is the Ministry of Finance that in coordination with the NIPFP that carried out the official study on GRB to design matrices of gender budgeting. While Center for Budget and Governance not only provides in-depth analysis of budget from gender lens, but also shows the pathways to projecting best practices and demand different sectors of economy facing intersectional vulnerabilities and marginalization. Kerala has been at the forefront of GRB right from 9th 5-year plan 1997, the WCP was institutionalized, and 10% of the state budget was allocated for gender concerns. Kerala was the first state to ensure active decision makers in the planning board of the government of Kerala, were the first to establish gender park in 2013 to work towards gender equality and empowerment of the state. So Professor Mridul Eapen, as a member of Kerala State Planning Board during 2016 to 2021, spearheaded all efforts of GRB processes with commitment for intersectional gender justice and directing development interventions beyond gender binaries. Now I request Dr. Mridul Eapen to make her presentation on a pragmatic response to gender responsive budgeting experiences of Kerala. Over to Dr. Mridul Eapen.
Thank you so much, Vibhuti. I must thank IMPRI for inviting me for this talk. I can see people who have heard this before, so I'm sorry for them, but I hope there are some who have not heard much about gender responsive budgeting, and I'm addressing them. And it's interesting to know for me that IMPRI, even without knowing who all are involved and what you all are doing, I was just getting emails from them about the web talks they were having, and I was attending some of them, and I found them very interesting. And I really wish IMPRI that then only later I found Vibhuti, you are there, and others whom I know are there. And I'm very happy that you've taken on this task, and it's really very enlightening and good for us to have good speakers speaking on, on different areas. I heard the one on urban development, I remember, and I heard 2-3 others. Whenever I could, I have been attending them. So all the best to IMPRI, and I'm very thankful that you have invited me today for this talk. Now, what do I mean by the pragmatic approach to gender responsive budgeting? The slide, Arjun, the next slide. Kerala has been attempting mainstreaming. Just a second, I don't know how to minimize all of you all so that I can see the full small active. Okay. Even supposing I don't want to see you, then what do I do?
Remove the speaker option, ma'am.
Speaker option.
You minimize it to just speaker, and then you'll see the screen.
This one? So this chota one? Where is that
right,
one? Is it
right top में आपको दिख रहा है view?
View.
In that, in that
Okay.
you change it to speaker, and then you'll get the screen on your.
Exit full screen? No. Swap video and shared screen, side by side gallery, side by side speaker. This one?
Yes.
I press on that, is it?
Yes.
Okay. So I get the full, now I get you, Sanghamitra, so it's okay. on the side, it's okay. So it was coming on the presentation, so I was a little. So we have been trying to mainstream gender through gender budgeting as an integral part of the process since the 11th plan. Earlier, as Vibhuti pointed out, actually, what we call gender aware planning, because we had the WCP, a very conscious attempt was made in the 9th plan at the local level to integrate gender into the planning process, the local planning process. And there was a 10% mandated out of the funds which devolved from the state, not state funds, but the funds which devolved from the state government to the local bodies. 10% was supposed to be kept for women-specific schemes, and the other schemes were supposed to undergo a gender lens. So the mainstreaming didn't happen, but the WCP continues, and only now I hear that local bodies are actually engaging in gender budgeting. 20 or 30 of them have done it, but I have not seen the document as yet. So from WCP, they're also migrating to a gender responsive budgeting type of situation. Now, I'm not going into the details of what is gender budgeting, why gender budgeting, and how, because I think most of you are familiar with it. But in very brief, I have to say that gender responsive budgeting recognizes the significance of women's unpaid household and care work, which tends to be neglected in macro development policy. Because what is the assumption about the household? It's the typical assumption that it is a male breadwinner and the woman homemaker. And another very damaging assumption, I should say, implicit assumption, is that women's time in household work is infinitely elastic, enabling them to balance work and home while adjusting to any adverse impact of changes in macroeconomic policy to keep the household running. And therefore, gender responsive budgeting foregrounds the need for public investment in these activities to enable women to participate equally in the development process. And that's the whole idea, that women and men should be equally on a level footing, be able to participate. And I think the pandemic has sharply brought out how women are forced into their role as shock absorbers across the world. There have been enough studies to show us that. Next one, Arjun. Now, with the with the persistent, why did this happen? Because there was a persistent mismatch between government policy and development outcomes. So feminist scrutiny actually focused on macroeconomic development policy and the urgent need to make it gender sensitive for bringing about a transformation of women's position. Socially and constructed gender roles leave women with little power economically, socially, and politically, the flip side of which is men's socio-biological drive for mastery. I mean, you're the head of the household, therefore everybody's under your control, and you can even be violent. So this sort of manifested increasingly as violence against women. Now, gender mainstreaming, as you all know, was formally established as a major global strategy for the promotion of gender equality at the 4th UN World Conference in Beijing in 1995, cited in the Beijing Platform for Action. And it was in 1996, actually, that Kerala introduced gender-aware planning at the local level in the 9th five-year plan. The next one. So it's an entry point into macroeconomic policy. I mean, let me say that we are doing gender mainstreaming through gender budgeting as an entry point to macroeconomic development policy to make it more gender sensitive. Now, what was Kerala's experience? From our own experience in every year of the 11th plan, as also of gender budgeting exercises done by other states, there were two main limitations we found. One was that even to achieve the technical objective of estimating the flow of budgetary resources to women, it was difficult to do it because of the non-availability of gender disaggregated data, making it difficult to separate allocations flowing to women from composite schemes, which impact both men and women, especially in the infrastructure sectors. Second limitation was, more importantly, the absence of a broader vision of including women in the development planning process so that gender needs can be integrated into the process across sectors right from the beginning. This would make the exercise more meaningful and move beyond getting bogged down in a number crunching game of guess estimating the financial flow of resources to women. So this became clear as we tried to do gender responsive budgeting using its own methodology. Now, next one, please. So, as we know, the focus of most gender budgeting work has been on the expenditure side of the gender budgeting, classifying resources flowing to women into part A and part B, the two together giving us the total. However, as I said earlier, it was difficult to segregate men and women's resources in composite schemes. Also, we could do this only for gender-related sectors where we knew very much that women are there and perhaps had some macro data on the numbers of women involved in agriculture or in dairy farm or in fishing, in education, health, where we had some data available. We could do this exercise for gender-related sectors, like, as I said, like women and child development, social welfare, traditional industries, etc. But which constitute not more than 35 to 40% of plan expenditures if you look up your budget. But almost 60 to 65% of plan outlays were in the so-called gender unrelated sectors, largely infrastructure, which remained outside the purview of the gender budgeting exercise. Public works, housing, water supply and sanitation, forests, irrigation, power, ports and transport, for which it was difficult to disaggregate the beneficiaries' data. So, next one, please. So that was the methodological challenge. How do we disaggregate the data in composite schemes? Now, so clearly one had to move beyond numbers and a focus on the chapter on women and child development to looking at women as growth agents in the state's political economy across all sectors, which meant engaging with visibilizing women in each sector, recognizing their contribution as consumer, producer, or worker, emphasizing the need to consider their needs, interests in the overall determination of sectoral and macro development policy, and the extent to which allocations can be shifted towards social and economic investment and provision of public goods beneficial for women. There is enough evidence to establish that we know that women are there in almost all sectors, but that they have not been, their problems and their growth achievements have not been adequately addressed in the planning process. In short, gender has to become an integral part of development planning, keeping in mind the fact that it is also a political process, because you have to shift resources from some sectors to some other sectors. In Kerala, the attempt was to address these lacunae, the non-availability of gender disaggregated data, and some sort of a perspective on women and their priorities in the state's economy. We attempted to address these lacunae through a more doable and pragmatic approach. We tried to see how much we could do with whatever we have in a pragmatic way. So we did that in the 11th plan when we did the gender responsive budgeting. In the 11th plan, we did not produce any document. We used to just send the data, which would approximately be part A and part B, and send it to the finance department, which then took it in there. The finance minister would quote some figures from these tables in his budget speech. But the 13th plan, we actually became a little, we strengthened the methodology a little bit more, and we could actually produce a document for all the 5 years of the 13th plan, and this is continuing. And this is one thing I think which I have to emphasize, that it has become sustainable. It is a sustainable exercise in Kerala now. For that, the reason I'll come to it later, but it is continuing and it will continue for the rest of the years also. So now let me just quickly give you all a feel of what was this pragmatic approach? What was the necessary steps in this pragmatic approach? The first, what were the ingredients? The first was, of course, a strong government commitment. I think now most states have been able to manage that. The finance minister or the governor or the chief minister announces the gender budgeting is part of their part of the agenda as far as budgeting goes. So this probably is now not relevant to most of the states because they have achieved this. Second is need to identify thrust areas of women's development. This is very important because it guides us in the process of formulating schemes and integrating gender into the plan process. So when we are making employment schemes, we also are aware that we want to generate or we want to create employment for women. We have that as a thrust area. So then we will try to push in the employment scheme for women and of men or men and women together into every sector that we think it is possible. So we have to identify areas of thrust areas of women's development, which will guide the process of formulating schemes and integrating gender into the plan process. Public expenditure would have to be directed to such schemes, some exclusively for women, while composite schemes which benefit both men and women have to be made more responsive to gender concerns. That is, what is the pragmatism in that? To focus on programs rather than finances, and to then ensure, to the extent possible, that funds are made available for these schemes. So let's first think of what we want to do for women, and then we start thinking of how to get the funds for that. Third is creating awareness on the significance of gender across departments, even those which are apparently gender related, because most of the time when the format goes to them, they say, but we have no schemes on gender. It doesn't relate to us. So what did we do in the 11th plan? What was the pragmatic approach we took? For instance, in the 11th plan, we initially restricted ourselves to primarily women's issues, which would not be taken up in any other department. It would be taken up by the women and child. It was called social welfare at that time. So gender-based violence, empowerment of women, occupational health, all these figured in the chapter on gender. Next one, please. However, in the next 2 years, as I said, women are there in all the sectors. And in the next 2 years, in the post-2008 recession period, when government was spending large amounts of resources on infrastructure to revive the economy, we forayed into the infrastructure sector with 100% women schemes, which would visibilize women in so many more sectors and be easily identified. So even transport, if it says, but how do we separate how many women are traveling by bus and how many men are traveling by bus? We say, no, you think of what scheme in your department would benefit women. So they said, yes, we should have good toilets and restrooms at all major bus depots. You see, so this was 100% if you take it for women in infrastructure sectors, at least as a beginning, it is a major pragmatic approach to sensitizing officials and policymakers to gender by focusing on 100% women schemes. So we had, we know that women too need infrastructure. So we evolved a scheme on gender-friendly infrastructure prepared largely by the departments themselves, which was preceded by a one-day capacity building workshop for officials. The morning was for some academic or some theories on what is gender. In a simple way, they were told about gender, what is gender, what is gender sensitization, what do we mean by sensitizing macro development policy. Afternoon, we gave them a checklist which was prepared by the Ministry of Women and Child Development of Government of India at that time, at the time of the 11th plan, I think they prepared it. And we said, you make proposals looking at this. We modified the checklist a little bit, made it simpler. You look at the checklist and make proposals for your own department. So this was a very helpful exercise. Make them do it themselves in the first workshop. So this was one way, what I call the pragmatic approach to sensitizing officials and having some schemes also in the infrastructure sectors, so that from 5 or 6 sectors which had gender schemes in 2009-10, we had about 12 or 13 sectors in which we had gender sensitive schemes in 2010-11. So next one, please. Now, I am just giving you what I thought was, I'll give you some examples of what I mean by part A, what are the schemes, how did we do part A and part B. Now, I'm taking more of the current ones. What we did in the 11th plan, I'm not taking that much, but some of the schemes were there earlier. Some of them have come new, some of them have got new components. Now, this is the way, for instance, you can, an infrastructure sector, police or housing, how do you make it gender sensitive? So this is what we did. There's a pink patrol, gender awareness and gender friendly infrastructure, construction of new women police stations and police women cells, basic amenities, public works, the PWD, how can we make them gender sensitive? So I'm just picking up a few, you know, there are many more schemes. Basic amenities, toilets in district, taluk, village headquarters. So this is what we did. Then housing. Housing is working women's hostels. The housing board wanted to do that. Then upgradation of women's material production unit in what is called Nirmati Kendra. There's another agency here. They have a women's concrete brick making unit. So upgradation of that. So that becomes a scheme for women, and that has been put under housing. Now, if you look at the social infrastructure, medical and public health, setting up maternity units, specialty healthcare unit for transgender persons. There's a new scheme this year. It was there earlier, but I think that much more focus has been given this time. Medical care for victims of violence, that is, we call it Bhumika. We took the example of Dilasa at that time. Bhumika came up in 2009. So Dilasa people were called to Kerala and they guided us in setting up Bhumika. And the homeo department, when they saw Bhumika, they said homeopathic department can start something. So they started Sitalayam, giving homeo medicines and counseling and all that. So homeopathy had Sitalayam. Then in labor and welfare, I'm just picking up an interesting scheme, protein-rich noon meals in women ITIs. We visited an ITI in Trivandrum, and I found that it was much under capacity. You know, the girls, there were not as many girls as warranted by the capacity of that. So we just said, you know, girls have this problem, you know, getting up early in the morning, coming out, and if they are married, then what about their food and everything? So we said, you just try this one little scheme. Give them, you say that noon meal is free for you, Vibhuti. And you believe it or not, it has really done wonders. You know, this noon meal for women in ITIs, it has really done wonders. It grew from a very small number to about 4 crores now. All women ITIs are covered. So that is one. The second one, and I'm calling part A 90 to 900%. I'll just tell you why. No, please go to the next one. Because Narega in Kerala, 90% are women. Unlike the mandated 33%, and other states, I think 50 to 60% are women. Here, above 90% are women. I didn't want to leave them out of gender budgeting part A. That's a very important component for us. So we have modified part A to 90 to 100. So Narega, then we have Kudumbashri, which is a specifically women's program where we put a lot of money for livelihood promotion. So Kudumbashri is there. So art and culture, this is now, we are emphasizing a lot on art, culture, and sports, which we think are very good ways of flexing minds and, you know, making people more gender sensitive through these activities, rather than probably being given, sort of lectures on gender sensitization. These are things, cultural initiatives, which can have probably a higher impact, we feel, because culture is so important to women. That we found that. And so Samam is a new cultural initiative for gender equality. Then Kerala Chalachitra Academy. There's one Chalachitra Academy. They want to train women in technical field of cinema. You know, the women are anyway very not found much in the cinema field, but there's so much scope in the technical areas also. Even if you're not directors, you can work in the technical area of cinema. So there's a scheme like that. Then there is a Kerala Sports Council Football and Volleyball Academy. Something different, challenging gender stereotypes. Sports infra facilities in special zones for women, another scheme. So I'm saying, if you know what you want to do, you can definitely think of a scheme and try to put it in the plan. That's what I'm trying to show you. Labor and labor welfare, another very interesting scheme was studio apartment for working women in urban areas. So women travel, lots of jobs are coming up in urban areas. Women want to have small apartments to themselves or rental. So studio apartments for women, that is also taken off. I think last year it has taken off. So 2 crores for that. Then in women and child development, I had to include this. It's a women and child development scheme. We have been struggling to get eggs and milk to be agreed upon of being served in Anganwadis. This year, the planning board succeeded and the department also succeeded, and eggs and milk will be given, I think, thrice in a week to Anganwadi children. So that was a big achievement, 61 crores for that. Then Ashwas Kiranam is another innovative scheme in the plan, where women who are largely the caregivers for physically and intellectually disabled children or elders, they are given a certain social assistance, a small amount, but just to recognize their care economy, their care giving role. Next one. But we know that these are 100% women schemes, but the larger resources flow to composite schemes, which benefit both men and women. So what was that we felt the need to develop a pragmatic method for separating the allocations. That was and strengthen the methodology of Part B estimates further. So one mechanism which helped us in this process was that while macro level data may not be available by gender, scheme-wise gender disaggregate data are indeed available with departments. So they have they have the data. So you have to keep on pestering them to give us that data, telephoning them, bringing them up. We want this data immediately. But they of course are also there's a problem for them because there's such massive data, and I'll come later to what we should be doing, helping them to actually how to systematize this data collection which they have. So through a well-established, and the pragmatic approach was, how was it done? We have a well-established planning process, the annual plan discussions. So while impressing upon departments the importance of 100% women schemes, the need to specify share of women for composite schemes, or the share expected to flow to women based on their own experience, or based on gender disaggregated beneficiary data which they have, was also stressed. Next one. So departments were encouraged, persuaded to break up total scheme outlays into components, highlighting those directed at girls or women, or have a woman component in terms of a specific percentage, or make available to us gender disaggregated data on beneficiaries, in some cases perhaps of the previous year, which could then be used to separate out the flow of resources to men and women. Fifth, it was very necessary to provide explanatory notes at the end of Part B. Why have we done this? Why have we taken 30%? Or why have we taken 40%? We have to explain it. So I know that the methodology is not anywhere perfect, but to me, it's some sort of a pragmatic, practical way of whatever we have, try to see whether we can get some robust estimates of what is flowing to women. Next one. Now, sixth, what were our thrust areas? Skill development, employment generation, livelihood security, given the low WPRs in the state, creating an enabling environment for women to work through provision of basic amenities. We have to look at women in their broader ecosystem. They have children, they have household work. So creating an enabling, and they have to be safe and secure while traveling and at workplaces. And prevention, the third was prevention of gender-based violence. So these were the broad things we had in mind. So when we were doing planning, we kept these in mind to make the schemes. And the thrust areas are also modified if necessary. Given extreme events in particular years or emerging areas of gender concern, the whole state machinery, planning board, and the departments gets into action to reprioritize schemes. In the flood time, more had to be given to the local bodies to give livelihood support to the women. So more funds were directed towards that. Some of the funds were reduced from the other departments. So you can also modify the priority areas given the situation. So I'll not go into detail. I think it's understood. So the next one. Next one. We are going. The floods, for instance, we had to reprioritize. Next one. Next slide, Arjun. So this year's GB schemes has schemes on COVID affected sectors and people. So we know we have that. And health sector and generating employment, more funds on socio-cultural schemes that for greater safety, security of women. So they have added more emphasis to education and employment because Kerala is, charting out the route to a knowledge economy. So education, skilling is very important. How do we access that from the total plan outlays of the government of Kerala? And because of the state's thrust on a knowledge economy. So more emphasis has been given on higher education and skilling in this particular budget, on women's safety again, because we've had violence during COVID. So more funds have also been given to the to create a gender awareness in different ways. And that's another interesting thing, that you keep thinking on different schemes. If one doesn't work, think of another one. What can we do to make things better? So that is what we have been doing. The total budget also includes schemes for students returning from Ukraine. We have lots of students who have come back from Ukraine, but I don't have the number of girls and how much is going to girls, but the budget, the state budget carries an allocation for that. Hence, by the 13th plan, you are able to develop a doable framework. With outlays allocated for 90 to 100% women-specific schemes included in Part A of a gender budget, and schemes in which women's share is specified. So with increasing sensitization, this will, now the departments themselves have become, keen on what can we do for women. So that sort of environment has been generated. Next one. And the process of learning over the year, that's very important, because I find in this year's budget, for instance, we can strengthen the gender budgeting in so many ways. An interesting improvement in this year's gender budget is providing scheme-wise allocations for transgender community, rather than just a total allocation. We used to give 5 crores is kept for transgenders. This time they have actually given it scheme-wise. So this is an improvement. And both in Part A and B, a brief picture of the scheme is written up in this particular budget, 22-23 budget, under the new member, Mini. They have given also a write-up on the remarks on the site. What is the project about? What is the scheme about? So including gender into budget has to go beyond numbers, to engage with visibilizing women in each sector, recognizing their contribution, emphasizing the need to consider their needs and interests in the overall determination of macro development policy, and the extent to which allocations can be shifted. Quickly, we'll just go through the Part B so that you understand how we did the Part B thing. I have not given all the details. Next one, Arjun. See, developing in the health, for instance, developing PHCs as family health centers. That's one scheme. There's a wonderful scheme that has happened. The primary health centers are now much added activities, and they're called family health centers. We took the information from them, and they gave us the information, 50%. They said, it's not that they are making it an easy number. No, they looked up their documents and told us 50%. Similarly, comprehensive mental health program. Both men and women are there. So you have to ask the department to give you a split up. They gave that. Then from the NHM, NRHM Flexi Pool, the components are there. We take the reproductive sexual health component and we get the number. This is only the state plan, okay? We're not including the central plan in this. Education, we have a scheme on free supply of uniforms. It is 50-50 because there are 49.75% are girls up to class 8. So we put 50%. IT at school, educational technology, which came in so handy during the pandemic. Support for students in international collaborative degree programs, okay, under higher education. Money is kept there, and girls are given 68% of that. Teaching, learning, and skill gap reduction in the new situation of wanting to create a Kerala knowledge economy, a lot of emphasis has been given there. Urban development, waste management, and we have, now I cannot say we are the only state because Orissa has come out with an urban employment guarantee scheme, which is much larger than ours. Ours is 125 crores now. Just like the Narega, we have this Ayankali urban employment guarantee scheme. In health insurance scheme for migrant workers, we have Avas, 1.5 crores. And we have, because of the pandemic, lots of non-resident Keralites have come back. So there's a big scheme for them. Quickly, I'll go through that. I think there's one more table on Part B. Arjun, because I'm running out of time. Responsible tourism. In tourism, training and capacity, the components are given, empowerment of women and marginal communities through tourism. Because we know that tourism, lots of women are involved in growing things in responsible tourism. The hotels are supposed to to buy things from these self-help groups of women, largely Kudumbashree women. So we can get from the components what are the things going to women, and we can put that as the allocation to women. Transport is another interesting one. One I gave you was where it was 100%, that is the toilets. Now they have e-mobility, autos, e-autos, and we made sure that 50% of those autos will go to women. So there's a composite scheme which has been split. Then Kerala Maritime Board, they have training programs for their engineers and officials. So we told them, give us the women. Are there women in your, they said, yes. Okay, give us the numbers of women. And we could take that, small amounts. But, it shows that they're all getting conscious of this. Art and culture, one of the, the most dream projects has been this KSFDC facilitating 2 feature films by women directors, and now 2 by SC/ST directors. So that's an addition this year, and 2 more films by them. So then, of course, cultural and upliftment of women and transgender persons are other schemes of which we take the proportions. Then 7th, I'm coming to quickly to the most critical approach in sustaining the GRB effort is the existence of an institutional mechanism. The planning board, which coordinates all departmental plans, including the gender schemes and programs. The advantage that Kerala has, and which facilitates the integration of gender into budgeting, is that it is followed concurrently by the departments and the planning board. Even reprioritization of schemes is helped by the fact that each department's activities can be scrutinized in one place. Such a mechanism is crucial to facilitating GRB, and together with the continued government support is perhaps our biggest advantage. Then I've given a summary statement of how actually allocations have been going up, right from the 2016, 2017, 18 up to 22, 23. Each year we have been able to encourage more departments to enter the gender budgeting fold, and our proportions have increased. So quickly, what has been, next one, what has been the outcome? One, definitely we have had an increase in workforce participation. That is, we were one of the laggards. We are still very low. As you know, Indian workforce women workforce participation are very low. We all know that. But Kerala was even lower, and we have managed to surpass the All India average. But of course, there are other states above us. But we are now higher than the All India average. And this is because in each of these periods of crisis, a lot of focus was given to livelihood support for women. So in the first package of the pandemic, 2,000 crores. In the first package of the floods, 2,000 crores was for Kudumbashree, for self-help groups, for Ayankali urban employment, for Narega. Narega shot up in those 2 or 3 years. So we find that and it has happened in rural areas and among the self-employed. So, and of course, to some extent, wage labor also, because Narega has gone. Now, another major outcome is challenging stereotypes. So we have these 2 films by the Film Development Corporation being made by women. One of them entered the International Film Festival, which was held here recently. I think she got an award for Best Debut Director. I think that was the award she got. Then our crime records data show a decline in all forms of violence against women from 2016 to 2020. Now, I know all the feminists will say that is all rubbish, that people don't report to the report to the police stations. I agree. But when we believe SERB data when the crimes are rising, we have to believe the data when the crimes are falling. But pandemic has pushed us back to this. That is definitely there. That pandemic has brought in violence. And in fact, even after the unlock, the levels are to some extent higher than what they were before the pandemic. But during 2016 to 20, there was actually a decline in the numbers in all forms of violence against women. So next one. The biggest challenge now ahead of us is the gender audit monitoring and evaluation. I think that's the biggest challenge that we face now and we have to do. It is also necessary to do a detailed ex-post budget analysis. After all, you've made the budget on 22, 23, you have to look at how much are we adding in each sector, how much money is going in each sector, what are the gaps still remain. Next one. Second is to continuously improve plan write-up. This is very important for all the states. When the plans are written up, this specific allocation to women has to be specified in the plan write-up. And which is, if you look at our annual plan proposals, or you look at the economic review of Kerala, you will find that in places it is written there, of which such and such amount will go to women, of which 30% will go to women. It's written there. It has to be written in black and white. Now, departmental data, there's another big challenge to have to be maintained much more systematically What is crucial here is to help departments to manage organized large data generated under the schemes, which needs to be disaggregated by gender and be made accessible. More and more departments have to be brought within the ambit of gender budgeting. That's what the attempt of the planning board will be, as many, because there's still so many schemes which have a gender component, we know, but we are not able to untangle it. Now, quickly, this is just by way of conclusion. Of course, there should be some capacity building program at least once in a year. Then all the policies should be gone through a gender lens, whether it's industrial, agricultural, IT, anything. Last but not least is funding. Some areas are clearly lacking funds, and we have to put more and more funds into those. So let me conclude by saying the next one, Arjun. The process described above is for the gender budget at the state level. As I said, there's a gender budget at the local level also, because that is 10% going plus whatever they get in the other sectors. That will be, so that is now being honed and being improved. And this, what I presented to you, was only the state budget, gender budget. So gender budget at the local level should go beyond the 10%. The 10% is the mandate, but they should foray into other areas, and that should be added to the gender budget. In conclusion, despite its limitation, it is useful because it sensitizes government society to the fact that budgets impact differentially on men and women, but by doing so create a consciousness that women's needs have to be built into the project formulation, which should get reflected in the scheme plan write-ups. And last, of course, it's a political exercise, we all know, because shifting anything from one to the other, there will always be the underlying gender relations are unequal, we know that. And so it's not very easy to get funds for last one. The last one, there's another slide. It's a political economy question. It should not be lost sight of. So while on the one hand, it's finding a fit between the technical project of mainstreaming gender equality in policy, programs and projects, the political project of challenging inequality and promoting women's rights. I think you were showing it in your chart, Vibhuti. We have to keep fighting for that. You know, that is not over. But we are using this as a means of achieving that. Hence, the struggle for gender equality will continue. But unequal gender relations can change, and gender stereotypes are being challenged, cannot be denied. We saw what happened in COVID, which were the best countries who performed, the countries which were manned or which were womaned by women. So we had the COVID-19 has come out strikingly, and we have challenged the androcentric views on leadership and governance. So social relations can change. That's what we are trying to do through gender budgeting. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Mridul Eapen, for very, very comprehensive and exhaustive presentation delineating processes of gender responsive budgeting in Kerala, explaining concepts, policies, programs, way forward, challenges, and connecting micro, meso, and macroeconomy, and also emphasizing the role of political struggles in challenging the gender norms and also the political economy issues. Now, I would like to ask Professor Ishita Mukhopadhyay that as gender economist, what is your response to Dr. Mridul Eapen's presentation? Over to Dr. Ishita Mukhopadhyay.
Thank you, Mridul, for laying down the Kerala budget experience and also making some general comments on the take from a gender responsive budgeting. So I would rather comment on the take for India as a whole and from the Kerala model. I would specifically mention something which is in Mridul's slides, and Mridul talked about it, that the role of an institution to carry forward this gender responsive budgeting. And this is the plan, the 5-year plans and planning board and planning institutions. So I think the take for India, this is very crucial, that the plan mechanism, how is the plan mechanism related to the gender responsive budgeting, and how the institutions are so crucial. So as you can see that in India, we have moved out of plans. So the scope of gender responsive budgeting, if the take from Kerala is taken up, then the scope for gender responsive budgeting is to be found in up in a different institution, but no different institution other than planning exists. So what is to be done in current in India with the dissolution of the gender planning apparatus? So this is a crucial question of taking the take away. The second, I think I would just lift from Mridul's presentations a few points. Second is the public investment part and the part of looking it up as a macro policy. This macro policy aspect of gender responsive budgeting is often missed out when we talk about GRBs. Even in the international scale, when we talk about GRBs, these macro policies and the appropriate macro indicators to indicate the direction of the fiscal expenditure budgets, to direction of these. This is very crucial. To look into or to get the signals out of the appropriate macro indicators. So macro policy is an essential part of it, which is mostly missed out when we discuss gender responsive budgeting. Gender responsive budgeting is different to gender budgeting, definitely. And Mridul explained it very clearly that it is an indicator to building up to a much greater project of inclusiveness of gender and visibility of women in all spheres. Now, although this started, the whole discussion started with the Beijing platform, I would also refer to 2015 Addis Ababa Convention of Transformative Finance for gender mainstreaming and the take from this transformative finance. Transformative finance in gender responsive budgeting will be, or rather has been a good indicator of these. I completely agree with Mridul when Mridul is talking about that the gender disaggregated data is not available always. So, so the challenge that Kerala had to build up the gender disaggregated data. Otherwise, the incidence of expenditure and the challenges are not earmarked. We are not getting the macro indicators. Now, sorry. As far as the take for India, again, since I'm talking about the take for India from the Kerala model is concerned, economic statistics is a challenged area. Generally, data is a challenged area, as we all know, that we are not comfortable with the kind of official statistics that exists in our country at all. It doesn't give data for all indicators, and it doesn't have a gender sensitivity, gender awareness with respect to building and collection of the data. So this is crucial to bring up gender responsive budgeting into the main dialogue. I would have a comment on in one of the slides when Mridul was showing that gender related sectors and gender unrelated sectors, these are very common. I would not go into the full women plan and the others, women component plan, not on WCP and not. But even in public expenditure in gender related sectors and gender unrelated sectors, this division, within the gender unrelated sector, I found forests. And this is something which has raised my query, because if we look into India as a whole, many women are fighting for their right to forests, which has been given by the Forest Act. So this is one of my comments about, but this division from the gender related sector and gender unrelated sectors, is this coming out of the budgetary expenditure exercise, or is this division coming out of the macro indicators, from where this division is coming up? So I think this has to be when we move beyond numbers, when we move beyond the funds, when we move towards indicators. So how do we make up this gender related and gender unrelated public expenditure? And it is definitely, and I'm very grateful to Mridul of interpreting this and bringing up the political economic question here. There's a clear political economic question which is often missed out as far as if we look into only the number game. The whole political economic questions of making some changes, of making changes in the whole society, making changes in the way in which women and men and the society look at their lives, like inclusion of transgender persons, increase in the work participation rate of women. So these are some of the changes which are movers and shakers of these gender discrimination process and patriarchy. So how can we move up into this movers and shakers? I'm bringing up Sense first, who gave first recognition to the intra-household food consumption disparity. So this was broken up. I give a single example. This was moved and shaped by the simple 33rd constitutional, the 73rd constitutional amendment, where women were elected as panchayat leaders, women were elected as leaders, local leaders in the panchayats, so that they had to go out and getting food for themselves earlier than the family is feeding. So these are some of the ways. So you attempt to do something, but it is ultimately a mover and shaker into the gender relations of the society. So the target of gender responsive budgeting, I'm very grateful to Mridul of bringing it up, is a deeper political economic question of moving beyond numbers. But how is Kerala moving beyond numbers? Kerala has been able to, 2-3 examples are there. But how is Kerala moving beyond numbers? And if the country is not moving beyond the numbers, is the absence of GRB a reason for that? It is sufficient, but others may say that this is not necessary. You can include it in various schemes and you can do it. But inclusion of schemes only cannot be the way in which we look at the GRBs. The indicators have to be macroeconomic indicators. So I think these are my broad comments, and these are the ways in which I would visualize the Kerala model, and whether can it be a model for the country when we have such divergences in the institutional setup, in the way in which the movers and shakers of these political economy is concerned, that setup. So whether this model can be replicated in the country without without having any way to shake off the prerequisites. So this is also the thing that is this is the headache of this gender responsive budgeting, which all of us share. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Ishita.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Emphasizing the planning process is very importance of planning process is very important. And currently, India doesn't have, only Kerala has continued. And also mentioning transformative financing, need for gender disaggregated data, and also the question of political economy. And also going beyond numbers, very important, and the challenge that we are facing in terms of declining work participation of women. Very, very insightful response. Now, I would like to ask Dr. Sanghamitra, Dr. Mini Sukumar, that as a member of Planning Board of Kerala, what are the challenges you are facing in post-COVID period with regards to GRB? Does Kerala state have a policy for women? What is the state policy for development intervention for the transgender communities? And what kind of gender disaggregator is collected recently? I think to some extent, Dr. Mridul Eapen has also taken care of that. And as a member of governing board of Gender Park, Department of Women and Child Development of Government of Kerala. Can you tell us about the role of Gender Park and how does it connect itself with the women elected representatives of Panchayati Raj institutions and Kutumshri, which is also again one of the best practice, considered to be one of the best practices at a subnational level. Dr. Mini Sukumar. Yeah.
Thank you, Vibhuti, for these questions to focus my comments. First of all, I think that Mridul has presented in detail about the process of gender budgeting that we are practicing. And when I was taking up the charge of the member of State Planning Board, my task was much easier because Mridul has already laid down the processes and the approach of gender budgeting, and it is stabilized, and the gender budget has been approved and acknowledged by most of the line departments and the government and the public. So my task was much easier. But at the same time, I can see that the process of gender budgeting has influenced the perception of our departments regarding how to formulate programs and schemes for women. Earlier, they are not at all informed about the importance of the gender budgeting, and later it was like adding women into the budget, some like the numbers. There are some numbers to be included, like if there is a scheme, there should be 30% or 50% to be benefited to the women. But this time, what I can see from the while reviewing the schemes, I can definitely see that there is some sort of changes in their perceptions regarding how to include, to an extent, the gender concerns of our society into their planning. So that is one major achievement of this gender budgeting for the last few years. So this year, there is some innovative approaches has been seen in the new schemes and in the new programs. And like what Mridul said, they have most of the departments has given the bifurcations or the detailing of the schemes, like the components. Like before, there was much of the schemes are not given in components, only giving the some aggregate type of data. But this time, many of the departments are willing to have these components, that gender components. So that is one achievement with respect to the planning process. And also, most of these officials and the ministers, they are, while interacting with them, they are all supporting the process of gender budgeting and bringing gender concerns into the budgeting and also the implementation of the scheme. So that coordination between the government departments, the State Planning Board, and the Finance Department is much stronger and institutionalized. That is one major achievement. So this pragmatic approach has been given this strength to this process. So I think now from this year onwards, we are trying to make it more in an analytical way of gender auditing. We are trying to make some sort of gender auditing for even for some selected schemes. And also, I think we can also see that in the while reviewing the schemes, and also you can witness it in the gender budgeting document, that certain collaborations and convergence has been made successful between the sectors or between the departments. Some of the departments are coming forward thinking about more collaborations and more convergence approach. For example, in this, while we are classifying the schemes into broadly into 4 sectors, the major sector was it is not into one sector, but the major category of the schemes were in the education, skilling, and employment. So these 3 things has visible in many of the schemes in different sectors and different departments. This has even given an importance in this education, skilling, and employment. So I wish to connect this with your question about the women's policy, the gender policy of the state. The gender policy of the state is focusing on the employability, enhancing the employability and work participation of women. That is the main concept, because we have a large number of unemployed women and a large number of educated unemployed women in our state. And this potential is not being utilized for many years for various reasons. Some of the reasons are cultural, social, and economic, and also related to the developmental process of the state. So we have a very good number of women, educated women, and women having skills and other capabilities. So the general policy of the state is mainly focusing on this, enhancing the economic empowerment of women, also along with addressing the issue of violence against women, combating the violence against women, and also giving importance to health, especially mental health. These are the major mainstays of the policy. And in this sector of coming together, education, skilling, and employment, we can see a larger number of schemes. Like there are 136 schemes across different departments are focusing on these three things. And also cooperation, the departments like cooperation, agriculture, animal husbandry, dairy development, these sectors has emerged as a major creator of employment opportunities for women. So that is one importance. I can see it as a result of the convergence or the spread of the awareness across the departments for new schemes. And for few years, state is witnessing the a growing feminization of agriculture in Kerala, because the participation of women in agriculture sector was declining for a few years because of the changes in farming practices and other things. And that was a major reason for the declining work participation rate of women in Kerala, like the paddy cultivation, which was a main field where women workers are participating. And for the last few years, the Kudumbashree and the agriculture department is promoting the joint liability groups for farming. And also the Kudumbashree groups are taking up fallow lands and attempting their lease land cultivations. So that's a major thing. And during the pandemic, many of these Kudumbashree groups are engaging with this thing, and they are utilizing some of the central schemes like the MKSP, and also combining it with the Narega. And there is a support from the agriculture department also, giving them seeds and other things, that fertilizers and all. So like that field is emerging, that feminization of this type of agricultural practices are emerging. So this year's budget, we can see a clear acknowledgement of the departments of cooperation and agriculture. They are coming forward, forming the primary agriculture credit societies for supporting these women JLG groups. So this is one example I can flag as an important step towards this convergence of like what we have following the that priority given to the social security and health, that is continuing, and Mridul has given many examples. So emergence of a growing emergence, a growing importance of concerns regarding the working women, like giving more working, set up more working women's hostels. And there is an innovative program called She Stay. It is by the Women Development Corporation. It is like rooms rendered to women who are traveling as part of their jobs and other, if they are traveling from their district to from their homes to other places, they will get cheap accommodation, safer, cheaper accommodation in places called, these are like some, like the Oyo homes. It is run by the Women's Development Corporation. So they are very safe for women. So it is called She Stay. They have a application based program. So it can be accessed from everywhere. Any women can access this. This importance of women's travel, women's initiatives for their own economic activities, their own initiatives for their expressions are all being acknowledged across different departments. Like what Mridul mentioned about the cultural department for this women's filmmaking and training for women filmmakers and technicians like that. So there's a growing acknowledgement for the real contribution of women, their expressions, their interests, their aspirations. That is one major impact of this gender budgeting. And still, we have in the state, we have an enabling atmosphere of political atmosphere, which is supporting women's concerns and also their right to be independent. And that is one major thing. And the legacy of Kerala development and the role of people's participation. In the success of Kudumbasri is mainly based on this people's participation at the local level. So, and also the importance of local self-government institution. They are playing a major role in fulfilling many of these schemes and also attaining these targets. So the role of this Panchayat Raj institutions, local self-governments, and the participation of women in LSGIs are very important. Even though their gender budgeting programs are going in a different way, but their presence and their support is a main, I think it's a major factor. And during this exercise, I'm feeling that there are certain challenges. Also, there are certain challenges. One is mainly what Mridul mentioned, like the non-availability of gender disaggregated data. That's a major issue. And also the second generational issues, like the higher number of educated women, how do we can find out suitable jobs for them, and also the issues of violence against women and increasing dowry, and the aspirations of the middle class for more and more money and related things, and all connected with marriage, the centrality of marriage. And the centrality of marriage is directly connected with that domestic violence and dowry debts, dowry, etc., etc., and also the toxic relationships and related crimes. It's a newer area which we are just acknowledging now, that there are a lot of issues coming of murdering young women because of these toxic relationships, and also the cultural setup in which women are still treated like a second grade person. So these are some of the issues which we still struggling with. So these are all these issues all have a direct impact upon this planning and other things, because the people who are sitting there and doing things are also sharing many of these prejudices and many of these cultural issues. So that is one major thing. And the other one is the issue of the marginalized communities, like Dalit, tribal, coastal communities, and their participation. And many of these developmental indicators are not yet being shared by these vulnerable groups, and that's another major challenge. Maybe it is directly related to what Ishita told about the rights of the women related to forests, and how we can define those rights of women who are from the forest communities, and a lot of issues and a lot of awareness also to be created in terms of the issues related to these vulnerable communities. The Kudumbasri is also not being very strong. It is not strong in these areas, and because there are a lot of problems, the operational problems are there, also the social and other issues of backwardness, and the lack of resources, mainly the lack of resources of these women to be part of these networks. That also is a major issue. So that I think that will be a major challenge.
Yeah. Can you just
So
highlight the role of Gender Park?
Yeah, sure. And the role of women's movement is another thing. And whenever we are talking about the this gender budgeting thing, the needs of the women should be realized and to be articulated by the movement. That also to be strengthened. Now, the most of these needs are identified by the government mechanism or by the government schemes and government officials. So the strengthening the women's movement to identify and articulate women's needs, and that is one major task we have to, from the movement side, I am talking about that. We have to look into that, strengthening that relationship with the women's movement and the planning process. That's another thing. And regarding the gender park is not directly connected with the training of the women representatives. The trainings of elected representatives are done by Kerala Institute of Local Administration, and they are doing a fantastic work. They are training women from all the 3 tiers of the LSGIs, and they have a online course on gender and development, certificate course on gender and development. And also recently they have started a course on local development. And recently they have started the exercise of gender budgeting, training for gender budgeting for the elected women representatives from selected Gram Panchayats. And also they are starting a center for this urban development also with gender concerns. So in gender park, it is mainly envisaged as a space for research, skill building, and cultural and other sort of gatherings of women to come together and have to express their art and other things. And there is a library and a research center and a campus which can be used as a place for all these purposes. So gender park is mainly, it is coming under the Department of Women and Child Development. It's a part of Women and Child Development, and it is in the process of stabilizing its activities. And there is a gender museum, heritage museum is started, and it is presenting capturing the history, the journey of Kerala women. So it is already started. That progress is, it is progressing. That work is progressing, and library is already open, and mainly the college students and housewives and young researchers are visiting the library, and they are organizing talks and other programs online and offline. Recently they have started offline programs also, and there is a fellowship program is coming for the women in social entrepreneurship. It is in the planning stage, and the Gender Park has organized 2 major international conferences, and the next one will be coming after 2 years. It's a biannual conference. That is another major activity. So, and the Women and Child Department is trying to make it more, it is like a hub of training programs for the functionaries of the department as well as from other departments. And they are also trying to make collaborations with the higher educational institutions for other programs. That is what Gender Park is doing. So I think I have.
Thank you, Professor Sukumar, for bringing out a very important aspects of convergence between different departments, and also how you are emphasizing education, skilling, and employment as a major concern. Recently, you also told us the highlights of gender policy of the Kerala state, and also highlighted the concerns of forest women and women from the marginalized section. So I think and challenges that you are facing. So very realistic, insightful narrative that you gave. It gave us a very grounded reality. Now I would like to ask Dr. Sanghamitra Dhar that you have worked with the UN institutions, and you have also worked with several state governments, no, as representative of UN women. At a subnational level, you have done the GRB exercise with several union territories and state governments. So how is your response to Kerala's performance of GRB? And which are the other state governments and union territories that are proactively and judiciously implementing GRB? What are the learnings for other states? I think Dr. Suchita also highlighted that there are learnings from Kerala model for rest of the states. So according to you, what are those learnings? Over to Dr. Sanghamitra Dhar.
Thank you. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. Before I say a few words, I would really want to take a moment to thank IMPRI team for organizing such an interesting discussion and also inviting me to be part of this discussion. As always, listening to Professor Eapen is always a pleasure and a motivation. So Kerala experience, as we know it now, is indeed a fantastic example of good practice. And very recently, UN Women has already documented this as a case study that will facilitate the knowledge sharing and scale it to other subnational under our current GRG project that we are implementing in 4 states. And as far as I remember, Gender Park of Kerala is also a collaboration that UN Women has supported. So yeah, we are trying to help in every gender related project that is possible for us. And cognizant to the time brevity, I'll just very briefly talk about what we understand by GRB in the conversation. And also, as you rightly pointed out, Professor Vibhuti, UN Women is working on many subnational level also, but from the beginning in the entire GRB conversation, we have been actively engaged right from the implementation or the adoption of the GRB in the country to building the manual. Of course, we have the veterans like Asha Kapoor Mehta and Paramita Majumdar, all of them contributing to it heavily. But UN Women was in the background supporting all of these conversations, because we believe knowledge management and knowledge sharing is very, very critical for this overall conversation. So yes, we see GRB's goal as to promote gender equality by influencing the overall budget process. So in that sense, we see GRB has to incorporate the gender equality perspective. So the moment we see in that light, the gender budgeting process becomes a sub part of it, but the bigger picture is actually looking at the gender equality perspective. So because we very broad, very majorly work on the ending violence against women campaign in the country and globally also. So that is there. Then along with it, we also in all our conversations, in all our advocacy on awareness, we try to put this conversation in record that gender budgeting process is not a separate budget discussion for women. It is a discussion where we are basically trying to simply increase the specific budgets allocation directly to these groups, be it the women, be it the transgender, be it any other marginalized group. So that is also one of our goals and our approach to the discussion. Then we also see that it involves, as Dr. Professor Eapen or Professor Ishita and Mini Sukumar, all of them have rightly pointed out that collecting revenue and allocating expenditure that addresses persistent inequalities between women and girls along with men and boys. If we do not see it in that bigger light, then we are actually missing out on the overall conversation, the inclusive conversation that we have. So in UN Women, we see it in that light. And that's why when we engage in this conversation, we strongly believe in building a strategic partnership, and capacity building is one of the major aspects that we look into: awareness generation, policy advocacy, and outreach. Everyone has pointed out the lack of sex disaggregated data. We are majorly working under this project also, and earlier also, we have been majorly working on building the capacities of the state governments in recognizing this and building a format. So like currently, if I give one example from my own personal experience of handholding the state, a remote state in India, in northeastern India called Manipur, the finance, because here the convergence is between finance and social welfare. So we have been instrumental in incorporating a format that has been like institutionalized along with the gender budget circular, where they have to, every department has to enumerate the numbers be it the beneficiary oriented or the non-beneficiary oriented. So we are expecting over a period of time, we will have that information where we just don't go on repeating that there is a lack of data, there is a lack of data. We are trying to address it by incorporating or rather institutionalizing this thing, along with the other aspect where we see the e-governance aspect where it is missing, and lot of discussions are around it. So we are also trying to build that conversation. We are also in the advocacy, we have various union ministries: agriculture, rural development, panchayati raj, MWCD, finance, all of them in the conversation, and the union level as well as in the state levels, because we strongly believe, and it's rightly been documented also, that until and unless there is a convergence of all these departments, holistic, realistic, and I'll pick the word from Mridul ma'am's presentation, the pragmatic plan cannot be made, because practically these officers need to understand how it has to be done, and it can be done only when we simplify those steps. So UN Women at our front are trying aggressively to build on those things. Capacity building is a major element where we see that along with an increased awareness, we also have to see the accountability. What is the accountability aspect on that dimension also, and how the increase in budget allocation. Sometimes we, as one of the speakers very rightly pointed out, the feminists might actually challenge us on this, but rightly pointed out, and I acknowledge and corroborate to it, that even a 1% increase is for me a victory, because when we see 0 and we see 1, that itself a quantitative person will automatically understand there is a progress. So be it a slow progress, but at least a progress. So that way we try to acknowledge it. Changes in the distribution of benefits among beneficiaries, that is like we always talk about maternity leave. We are also at UN Women, we also try to talk about paternity leave. Why not even on that conversation? So we try to build on that. We have also tried to introduce and increase new policies, be it the Mudra or Safe Cities project and all. So overall, UN Women has been trying to build a technical support which institutionalizes accountability framework nationally as well as subnationally. And there are too many states that we are engaged with, so enumerating that will be a long list. So, but yeah, broadly, all the major players in the country who are working on GRB, we are very grateful that we have been part of that conversation in all the regions of the country. And also one small thing that is an internal thing, that UN Women's methodology on women's safety audit was even acknowledged by the Government of India at the 71st session on UN General Assembly. So we have been trying to make these overall changes and rather a mindset change, because someone rightly pointed out the mindset has to change, not only of us who are working on it, but the other person on the other side of the table. Because if they don't realize that, yes, there is a need for a change, no matter how much we discuss on this, how much we try to build the capacity, end of the day, they will still say that, okay, women are the second citizens, and why are we so bothered about it at a later period? So we don't want that to happen. And that's why we are making kind of overall behavior dimension, where we are trying to change all these mindsets through systemic small steps. It may seem very small, but these are very critical, because if those changes are not made, until and unless those changes are made, we cannot actually mainstream the overall conversation. And Vibhuti ji, in your post, one of the person had pointed out GRB cannot be just one tool. I accept that. To that audience, I just want to say that this is just one tool that we are talking about, and thank you for pointing it out. This is one tool that is looking at the policy level, there are numerous other tools that are working in tandem with this. And thank you for, I hope I have answered your query.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I think, thank you very much, Dr. Sanghamitra Dhar. And I think what all you have told, I think I would like to add that you have also gone beyond gender binary, and you have also highlighted intersectional marginality. So GRB tool, how can it be used for empowerment of scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, person with disabilities, elderly people, and transgender community. So I think that I found, and I find all those things are in public domain, so easy to download and share with the students and researchers. So I think that is a very important role that UN Women has played. And I think now you have started giving material also in Indian languages, no? Some of the Hindi.
Yes, we are working aggressively on that also.
They are also downloadable. Yes. Thank you very much. Now, the last question is to Dr. Suchita Krishnaprasad. You work with the workers' organization, trade union movement, and you have also teaching. You are teaching economics. How would you see Kerala's experience being useful to other states and also for Maharashtra? What are the learnings of Kerala? Experiment. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Professor Vibhuti Patel and Dr. Arjun Kumar for having me here. It has been an enriching experience to listen to people who have actually gone from ground into maybe the budget room and, actually made it happen. So I think there are many, the entire journey of going from number to schemes, or breaking up all the schemes and showing the journey from the basics to the self-actualization. I would almost put it as, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The first being very basic and final being self-actualization. So the kind of schemes that Kerala government has been able to put into their gender responsive budgeting in terms of making women technically more efficient, the working women's hostels and so on, and especially the end result of all that being the labor force participation rising, and I think between the Part A and Part B data that Professor Mridul showed, I was particularly fascinated by the urban employment schemes. There are many experts on employment like Santosh Mehrotra and Amit Basole, who have been talking for a long time about bringing in the Manrega into the urban areas. And hats off to the Kerala government for actually implementing it and finding out how many women are going to benefit.
Also providing hostels for the workers.
Also providing hostels. So making everything, and then the midday meal and the support that has been given during the pandemic. And now that I think the entire process has been very dynamic, basically, from helping students who have come from Ukraine, of course, without any disaggregated data and so on. But all of that, I think each of those points can actually be a best practice. If you ask about Maharashtra, I think, again, going back to the hierarchy of needs, maybe at the first level, you have to ensure that the female infanticide goes down. So the first thing is survival, of course. We all know that in Maharashtra, which is supposed to be a progressive state, the child marriages have increased during the pandemic. So how do we support them, children or families who think that getting a girl married off at an early age is the only resort? What is the support that the state can give? All right, and there is a dropout rate which has increased. Okay, and again, the women dropout rate has increased. Data also shows that women going back to work after the pandemic, the number has fallen down. So these are all the areas where I think in Maharashtra we may have to work, because Maharashtra has been traditionally a very progressive state, a state with Pule and people like who I've spoken about.
Children also have increased.
Pardon?
Out of school children, especially
Out of school children has increased, and girls' education has got secondary importance. So, of course, the central government is coming up with various programs for developing digital platforms and so on. Keeping the suspicion aside, can probably, let's say, in the local self-governments or local governing bodies, can digital platforms be made available for, of course, the televisions are now keeping classes for, at various standards. So, so these would be, I think each one of those can be a best practice, which can be actually written down and found out whether that can be taken up. I actually had one little question also for Professor Mridul. Debbie Bundler and Gay Hewitt's book on practical journal, practitioner's guide to understanding the gender response budgeting shows that there are variations, of course. Of course, when we take from one state to another state, they say that there would be differences based on socio-political context and whether the initiatives were coordinated by mainly the bureaucrats and the government legislators or the civil society organizations, and capacity of the institutions themselves. It looks like Kerala has very strong institutions. But most of this effort has been from the planning board, which again, as Professor Ishita pointed out, at a national level, if the planning commission has exited, so are we going to have a vacuum at that level? Okay, so in fact, even at the state level, unless and until there's a coordinating machinery, it would be hard to find out. First of all, we are talking about gender disaggregated data not being available. If there is no coordinating authority, it would be impossible. So one can learn this also from Kerala, having a strong coordinating body. Of course, I think eventually every state, right now, barring some 9 states, all other states in India have introduced gender responsive budgeting, some 9 states barring 9 states. But I think increasingly there will be a pressure because women as voters have emerged as a very powerful lobby. And I think whether it's a national election or a local level election, many have found out that this is a hidden voter who's probably not there in the rallies, probably not talking much. And the recent findings show that women are not going by the caste or the rest of the typical biases that are introduced, or the head of the family can no longer dictate women where to vote. So I think this, therefore, is going to be a powerful lobby that politicians would also like to woo sooner or later. So, of course, then there are, Nirmala Banerjee speaks of different levels, once again, of how to approach in the gender responsive budgeting, in which she mentions that, of course, we'll have to support the activities which are traditionally genderized. Okay, so maybe cooking gas or drinking water or better, sanitation and so on. So these would be, and the safety and so on. So these are, of course, looked at as patriarchal, perceptions.
But they are gender needs, no?
Yeah, and
needs.
yes, but as we say, going from that level, Kerala has moved on to a self-actualization mode. And it's heartening to see that labor force participation has increased beyond the national average in Kerala as a result of all this, perhaps. And 2 women have actually gone and bagged award at International Film Festival, which is, in the coming days, the media and the film is going to be a very important component. Creating opinions. Opinion makers are going to be these people, and therefore that. But coming to evaluation of a budget, I feel there are many which are some of the effects are lagged. You can't immediately, so even though we say macroeconomic indicators and so on, but when you're empowering a class of society to see their results coming out and making an impact on the society, might take a little longer. especially in case of women. So data says that after the Grameen Bank revolution, for example, in Bangladesh, it took about 15 years for average number of children in the family to drop from 6 to 3. So this kind of it's a long process. And as Mini Madam mentioned, that new challenges are coming up, like toxic relations and so on. But it's heartening to see that the authorities are aware of these things. And when you're aware and not hiding, aware and not making another political polemics, creating another political polemics and confusing people, when you're addressing it, there is a high chance that it would be addressed in a couple of years to come. So I think each one of those stories can become a best practice. And I think Maharashtra can learn a good deal from Kerala. In fact, when I did a program for ILO on role of labor administration in social dialogue, I found that in Kerala we had online industrial relations chat rooms where you could simply come. And so the digital platform for people to simply come and air their grievances, that's a phenomenal step that was taken up. So yes, I think we can learn all these things about not just thinking about numbers, but coming to schemes. And there again, probably not just being bureaucratic, but engaging the civil society organizations or NGOs. We have effective NGOs in Maharashtra. We have Pratham for engaged in education and so many. So engaging with them, and then so that it can go from top to bottom and again bottom to top. And, going from one level, making sure that there are no starvation deaths. Sadly, this budget cut down the allocation on Anganwadi and Asha, thinking that the worst is over and probably we don't have to support. So the minute that happens, the nutrition level goes down and it starts showing declining results. So right from there to protecting children, women, girls who are pushed into marriages, to protecting women who have had to had unwanted pregnancies during the pandemic. So there are a number of issues, and I think there's much to learn.
Trafficking of girls.
Trafficking, and so on. So there's much to learn, as we said, dropouts from the schools. So yeah, thank you for allowing me to share this and learn from so many valuable.
Thank you, Dr. Suchita, for giving such a balanced comparative analysis and also highlighting the participatory processes, which are that's very important so far as the Kerala's experience is concerned. Now, there is a question from Rajini Menon from Oxfam. Dear ma'am, thank you so much for this enriching presentation. Did you have any specific approach to visibilize needs of adolescent girls? So, yeah, Dr. Mridul.
There, I just talked about a very few schemes. If you look up the gender budget, you will find there was earlier, of course, central government scheme on adolescent girls. Even now there is, but they are very much there in some of the schemes that we have. Definitely, the adolescent girls, especially, not only just through Anganwadis, and they are supposed to be looking after the adolescent girl clubs and all that. But even otherwise, the government has schemes for adolescent girls, especially, and for boys also. And that's what we're realizing now. That so many things we have to do, boys and girls. Whether it's sensitization, whether it's for boys to learn right from the early age, cooking and household work together with girls. So many things are now, actually figuring in the minds of the policymakers, because, as I said, for creating a gender-conscious society, we have to keep on thinking of new and new things. Because something doesn't work, what do we do? So, if there was a wonderful program which came just before pandemic, night walks in Kerala. There was this, what Mini said about the toxic relationship, the jilted lovers. There was 2 or 3, very sort of consecutive killings of girls, either through burning or through because the lovers were jilted. They didn't, they didn't take no for an answer. So the girl was just shot. So even the women were so agitated, when and the minister had a huge meeting of all the concerned people, NGOs, government officials, and all the other teachers, etc. And in that, one of the schemes which emerged was, let's have night walks. Let's establish our right over, the city, because it happened first in Trivandrum, and then it later went to the districts also, but it had to stop because of the pandemic. So I think, and now of course there's pink police. We have a pink police. They still are carrying on with the old pink and blue, pink for women and blue for men, I guess. But so that there's a pink police as part of the police force, and they are, sort of collaborating or helping out communities like the residents associations, to keep a sort of watch on what's happening. So new things in creating awareness. I think that's the thing I want to emphasize, that we can't sit with one scheme and think that's going to solve the problem. No, you have to keep, and see what Minnie was talking about, the legacy of public action. This whole legacy of where people mobilize and we think of our concern first is how to help the people. I don't know how it happens, but and this question was asked. I don't want to go on to the other thing now. I wanted to respond to Ishita and Sanghamitra and Suchita, but let's see if there are any more questions. Then
there are questions. Two questions for you. One is from Neelam Rana. Thanks for a very insightful and interesting session. Have few questions to Professor Mridul Eapen. In the current form of GRB reporting, i.e. Part A and Part B, where would the Harit Karma Sena scheme fit and why? And second question is that the reasons why certain sectors are considered quote unquote gender related and quote unquote gender unrelated sectors, and what are the implications of such division for GRB and women?
First I talk to the gender related and unrelated, which I think Ishita also raised. You see, this was a term used in those checklists. It's a very simple term. It doesn't mean anything very deep, All it meant was that these are sectors where you can see women a little more than, and you can probably disaggregate them, rather than certain sectors like transport, as I said. How do you know how many women are traveling by bus, how many men are traveling by bus? Impossible. So that is what they called. So it was a very simple term, but it didn't mean anything more than that, So it is only that you cannot have a gender marker. Is it zero gender sensitivity? Is it to some extent gender sensitive? You can have markers like that, like the UN has done. So it doesn't mean more than that. So this is what I want to say first about. And the first question was, sorry?
About the
Harita Karma Sena. If, in all probabilities, it's all women Sena. In Kerala, the Harita Karma Sena, if I remember right, was totally a women thing. But even if it is not, supposing it is men and women, there are all these are documented with the panchayats. It's all there. So you can know how many women and how many men. But my recollection is that the Harita, there were two things which happened earlier. There was what is called the labor bank, which was men and women. Then the Harita Karma Sena, which was for the sanitation program. That I remember that it was panchayats, and I think it's mostly women. So that was I think my answer to that. It's primarily women. Maybe Minnie might know a little more on that.
Minnie, would you like to answer about
Harita Karma Sena? Yeah, this Harita Karma Sena, basically it is started like by the Kudumbashree for women working as volunteers working with the agriculture field, and also with this what is called waste management in Gram Panchayats and all. And now they are more organized. The LSGIs are selecting women groups for doing this work of waste management. Basically,
that means composting.
Not composting. They are collecting the
and segregating.
Because they are the waste from houses, and not the the non-degradable waste like plastics, bottles, other things, and they collect it, and at panchayat level or the gram panchayat level, they collect it. At LSGA level, they collect it together and hand it over to the another agency. So they will get money both from the houses and also from the LSGIs.
Yeah.
It is like a partly an income generation scheme, and also connected with the entire biodegradable, non-degradable waste collection.
So it's primarily women. It's primarily women.
Primarily women.
Primarily, yeah.
So it is part A.
Yeah. So the second question.
It would be.
Yeah. The second set of questions by Neelam Rana are addressed to, I think, mostly Professor Ishita.
Shall I add one more thing regarding the adolescent program?
Yeah. Please.
There was one question about the adolescent program. That we have adolescent clubs or adolescent programs in Kudumbashree, and also there are programs in the health department, and also the new scheme introduced for by the sports and youth welfare, that women specific zones for in the sports complexes. There also the adolescent girls are one of the beneficiaries, and more other programs like the life skill education and some sort of programs are also there as part of the school education program, directly related to the adolescent, both boys and girls. And in Kerala, most of the adolescent, the age group are in schools. So many of these programs are implemented through schools, and the dropout rate is very minimal, and most of the girls are mainstreamed into school education. So that is one thing. And also I forgot to mention one interesting program we started this year, as per an example of the convergence between the Kerala Housing Board and Women and Child Department. That is called Tande Idam. That means her own space, That is for the women, the girls who are completed 18 years at the Nirbhaya homes and in the orphanage, like that girls' homes. They have to move out after attaining the 18 years of age, because they will not get support. They will not stay back in the homes after 18 years. So many of these women have no place to go. So this year, this Women and Child Department came forward with a scheme called this Her Own Space, Tande Idam, giving support for building their own houses. So we modified it in collaboration with the Kerala State Housing Board, because they have readily available housing units as apartment complexes for the lower income groups. It is around 20 lakhs, like priced smaller units. So we combine these two programs together, and this year we are implementing it, because they will get cross subsidies from Women and Child, and also from they will get the money from Women and Child and get a subsidy from the Housing Board. So they can manage to get a 2-bedroom smaller flat units for these girls. So the women who are already, the girls who are already having skill training or having some sort of jobs they have already attained, they can move out to this housing units, and it will be in their name. It is like their permanent house. They can own that house. So we start this program, this scheme, as a pilot program this year, hoping to have 10 housing units for this year, and maybe for next year we can increase it. So that's another attempt for a collaborative approach, attempt for a collaborative functioning of two departments. That I forgot to mention during my presentation.
Thank you very much for such an inspiring news that you given. But now the next set of questions are, I think, addressed to Professor Ishita, and Neelam Rana asked that besides lack of disaggregated data, what are the other major research gaps in GRB? For example, panelists pointed out the need to go beyond numbers and understand political economy aspect. What kind of interdisciplinary studies are needed? So would you like to enlighten us?
Actually, yeah, Mridul also spoke that we need to move beyond numbers. And this is the difference between studying an accounts part of the budget and studying the implications of this budget. Gender responsive budgeting is basically that you move beyond numbers to look into the gender implications in the society. And you need interdisciplinary study of women's studies, development studies, political economy studies. You need these to understand the relations between human beings and the relations, the production relations, and how these are affected, how the sexual division of labor is getting affected basically due to these gender responsive budgeting. It's not only gender mainstreaming, that is, it doesn't end only inclusion. It's not that it is not that the whole Indian data is telling us that even if you include women in a large number of schemes, it initially started with the empowerment policy in 2001, then with declared gender budgeting in, sorry, in 2005. But why we are not successful? Why we are not successful in changing the gender relations in the country? That we didn't go beyond numbers. We means the state didn't go beyond the numbers. State didn't go beyond only the level, the numbers, that is the inclusion. How many did you include? Did you change their lives? Did you have a policy which would be changing the relations in the society? So does it change the sexual division of labor? So the target and the ambition of these schemes are much greater. The perspective.
So the research agenda, if you can tell.
Research agenda is of course of hitting down the sexual division of labor.
I think
why is it happening that the work, the severe fall in the employment in India, which Kerala is combating. In fact, it's a challenge to Kerala as well, and they combated it to gender responsive budgeting. But why couldn't we educate the girls? But even we educate, why are our education numbers totally inconsistent with the workforce participation? That is, you have girls in education, but we have lesser women. Why we have this missing number? Why are we having this educated pool of unemployed women? That is reaching beyond the numbers. So we have to reach beyond the numbers, and this is the gender gap in the research. That is, we have to understand the implications and the indicators. What are the markers? What are the indicators? The markers cannot be total utilization and only inclusion in terms of number. That is why, in fact, some of us mentioned, it came up, that this gender responsive budgeting is going to see the effects with a time lag. It has a lagged effect. Now, this lagged effect has to be recognized. How can we minimize the lagged effect? So we have to understand it has a lagged effect. Now, this time lag, it has a gestation period of changing. It's a long-term value. It adds a long-term value to the macro perspective of the economy. So we have to recognize it as having a lagged effect in the macro perspective in the economy. But in the meantime, new research gaps may come in, new things may emerge, but that has to be accommodated in the next year. So it's a dynamic process as such.
Right.
It is not a static thing which can be replicated. When I'm asking for takes from Kerala model for the country, I don't mean to copy and paste it. It's not like that. It's not like that. It's a lagged effect and it has got macro dynamic implications. So we have to look at it in that light. So these are the, why do you need interdisciplinary research? These are the things.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ishita.
And thank you for inviting me. And this has been a very vibrant discussion with.
So Ms. Zubia Moin also has a question. Zubia, please unmute yourself.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. It was a really interactive session. And I want to address the question to all the panelists present here. So I'd say that all the ma'am touched upon wage laborer and livelihood and self-employed. So as we know that Kerala is also largely urban and service sector is also there. So What is the scenario of the unemployed women in other arenas and for middle class women? And are there any unemployment exchange or allowance which also cover poor as well as non-poor and aspirations of young Keralites and upward mobility opportunities, as Kerala is also linked to the world and international migration?
Yeah. Who would like to answer?
I've talked a lot, but I think this is a
Middle
very
class,
interesting
middle class.
question. Yeah.
What about the middle class women?
Middle class women, you see, I think sometimes what is happening is there are things happening at home. There is a lot of them involved in some activity, probably, which is not recorded. You know, there's lots of activities happening at home which are not recorded. We know that the workforce participation rate, if you look at home-based work, if you really took that into account, it would be. But the point is that what type of home-based work? Is it subcontracting little, making parts of little things? So it doesn't really mean that women are employed in a decent activity, and decent of ILO terminology. So the middle class women, the educated women, now the thing is, of course, there are reasons why they may not be going out to work. There could be, social reasons, or, the family doesn't allow them to work after they get married. There's a issue like that also, that, if you're a little better off, then, if it's a work which is of your, status, you'll be allowed to go. Otherwise, you may not be allowed to go. So that is a big problem in Kerala also, that some of the women are not coming out to work because it doesn't either match their educational qualifications, or it is not considered to be a status in terms of the social, the class they belong to. So this is the sort of thing which is being trying to address very much, because, if you read the last budget, not the gender budget, but even just the budget of Kerala, a lot of emphasis has been placed on how to get the educated. I think 5 lakh or some number was given as educated unemployed women, and how do we actually bring them into the employment field. So now they're supposed to register. Kudumbashree is actually a submission under the knowledge economy mission, where you can register. What qualification do you have? So I'm saying that one thing, as somebody pointed out, that the government is very much aware of what is happening. It's not that the government is not aware. The government is also trying to take action. But the point is, sometimes it's not reaching to the extent it should, and sometimes it's not really having the effect that it should. But that the government is aware of all that is happening, there is absolutely no doubt. So this question that you asked, especially the middle class, that is what we're trying to do now. How to get them? I think there were actually 2 or 3 in the budget, if I remember, how to address the issues of the less educated, how to address the issues of the somewhat more educated, and the very educated, the IT wallahs, like that. So they've actually broken it down into, because we know that education may not reach all, then are they going to be left out of the whole thing that is happening in Kerala? So how do the Kudumbashree women, for instance, raise their levels of living? They are not so educated, but the younger ones are. So there are now, what do they call? They call that a group now. The younger women are being formed into self-help groups, and mostly Kudumbashree daughters, that sort of a thing. They've got a name to that. I'm forgetting the name. Ajivika or something like that it's called. Ajivika. And they are forming groups now so these are the women who are going to try and access the new things that are happening in Kerala. Okay, so that's how I respond.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Thank you all the panelists for very, very interesting discussion.
Vibhuti, I just want to say one thing.
Yeah,
Vibhuti,
yeah,
I want to say one
thing. Please, yeah.
One thing I wanted to say to Ishita, that this whole institutional thing, and I think it's not because you don't have a planning machinery that you have to make a mechanism. It could be the department, the finance, and women and child. These 3 are very crucial for discussion on gender schemes in each sector. So when in a state, the one department is planning something, there should be a mechanism. The finance must be there. They must be giving the money. So, but there should be a cell in which, I don't believe in the gender budgeting cells, they don't seem to have performed well, but an agency which is finance, planning, even without planning, finance, the department, and the women and child. Something of that sort has to work, Ishita, in the rest of the country, I
Women
feel.
child is the most powerless, no?
Most, yeah.
I would absolutely
Like
agree
that.
with you. I was trying to talk about the institutions. There must be a backing
Yeah, there has
of
to be.
institutions. There has to be. And you have brought in very importantly this area of planning, which acted as an institution
Yeah.
in Kerala. So in India, without these institutions, we must build up another kind of
Exactly.
institutional
Exactly.
support.
Has to be done.
Institutional support is very much essential. That's what I try
Yeah.
to.
Can I come in here?
No, Sanghamitra, I want to say one thing, then you come
Okay.
in. I wanted to say how much actually, I didn't go into the history of gender budgeting in Kerala, but initially, you know, with the formation of the feminist economics groups in the 11th plan by Saida Hamid, you know, the UN women came in a big way at that time. And they were holding all the meetings and workshops on gender budgeting. That's how we all got noticed. You know, the work we were done here got noticed. I think I remember Yamini coming here and looking at all the schemes which were there in the 11th five-year plan. And then we used to have workshops, and Asha and Paramita and all these people, Bhumika, Yamini, all of them were, you know. So UN Women has done a lot really in terms of, I didn't say it, but when you said it, I realized it's all started with the interest and the finance and the support we got from the UN. Okay, I wanted to say that to you. Now you can say what you.
Thank you,
Woman in the
Mridul ma'am.
apex body planning.
Just one addition to what Ishita ji has just said, that in the states, Ishita ji, the states that we are working in, planning is there, though the role has changed. What we are trying to do is, along with the nodal departments, we are converging planning into the conversation, because planning still now has the role of building the state vision plan. That's a different plan that they make for the overall state. So what, in my case, I will say from my present experience in Manipur, although a very small state, but a very vibrant state and very proactive state, what we are doing is we have converged that thing, these departments, and we are using IDMC beyond what has been assigned in the manual. So we are building the capacity of the IDMC to see in this convergence portion, so that it becomes a sustained model where whether UN Women remains or not, they will function independently and they will sustain it and they'll take it forward. Like in case of, as Mridul ma'am is saying, over there now they are thinking beyond the basic primaries. So they have gone beyond, as Krishna ji also pointed out. If I look at the Maslow's model, self-actualization is a way ahead. We cannot think on those, but at least the first primary pyramids, if we are able to attain, then at maybe another century it might take, I don't know, but at least our progression is towards that. So I just wanted to put it in record in this conversation, that processes are being made, though some roles might have changed, but we are trying to make do with the resources that are there in an innovative way, so that it can remain as a mainstreamed and sustained model. So with that, I just wanted to make this submission, that yes, planning is not in a very primary role, but planning is part of the conversation in most of the states. We do try to rope in planning majorly, because their role is very primary.
Nodal department remains the Department of Women and Child.
Yes, nodal is women and child, but planning is one of the focals, definitely.
Just two sentences actually. I think whatever happens, the pressure on the government to move towards gender responsive budgeting is inevitable for at least two things. One, which I mentioned, that women voters are now
political constituency.
Yeah, politically conscious. And the second thing is, whatever 5 trillion or whatever economy we want to build, okay, the McKinsey report says that if the labor force participation of women matches with men in India, we will add 26% to the GDP.
Even World Economic Forum also.
So yes, so if you are thinking from the macro perspective of becoming rich and prosperous, then also gender responsive budgeting necessary. And at a micro level, a woman whose cooking gas has become cheaper will decide which government comes into power.
Yeah.
So
Very important. Very, very important.
To end with that,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. So thank you, Professor Mridul Eapen and expert discussions, Professor Ishita Mukhopadhyay, Dr. Mini Sukumaran, Dr. Sanghamitra Dhar, Dr. Suchita Krishnaprasad for a valuable insights on GRB. The COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated pre-existing economic inequalities and intersectional marginalization, and rigorous and concentrated GRB efforts are needed more than ever to facilitate gender-sensitive economic recovery in the face of current crisis. It is in this context that we need to learn from example of Kerala regarding implementation of gender-responsive budgeting. It's concerned with gender-sensitive formulation of legislation, programs, schemes, allocation of resources, implementation and execution, audit and impact assessment of programs and schemes, and gender disaggregated data and follow-up corrective actions to address gender disparities. We all accept that gender responsive budgeting is a powerful tool for achieving gender mainstreaming so as to ensure the benefits of development reach all genders. Here we are going beyond gender binary, and Kerala has also done marvelous job by providing census of transgender persons so that development interventions can be made. Today's discussion has shown that elimination of gender inequalities, for that gender responsive budgeting has both intrinsic and instrumental relevance. Persistent gender inequality hinders overall growth and development of a nation. As I think the last statement made by Dr. Suchita, the economic rationale for promoting gender sensitive budget also emanates from efficiency and equity perspective, that 50% of the population of citizens, their energies are not channelized and development investment is not made, then it is the state or the nation which is the loser. Gender responsive budgeting exercise highlights how gender hierarchies influence budgets, gender-based unpaid or low-paid work. Kerala gender budgeting efforts stand out globally. I would not say only nationally, but I would say it is globally because of its Human Development Index, GDI and GEM are also quite praiseworthy. The achievement could happen due to knowledge building, networking, institutionalizing processes, and capacity building and enhancing accountability. When union budget allocation has stagnated, and this year it has even deteriorated with only 1% for the social sector, 99% has gone to capex. Kerala's record is really inspiring. I would like IMPRI team to take over now.
Thank you, ma'am. So over to Zubia.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. It was indeed a very stimulating discussion with all the enlightened experts, and it was within a very limited time, and we would have loved to learn more from all of you. So as we come to the end of this extremely enlightening discussion, I, Zubia Moi, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, New Delhi, would like to formally propose a vote of thanks on behalf of IMPRI Gender Impact Study Center. We are grateful to Professor Vibhuti Patel for chairing and leading the special talk on a pragmatic approach towards gender responsive budgeting experience of Kerala. We'd also like to express our gratitude to the speaker for today's session, Professor Mridul Eapen, for taking out her precious time to share her views on this crucial topic. We thank our esteemed discussants, Professor Mini Sukumar, Professor Suchita Krishnaprasad, Dr. Sanghamitra Dhar, Professor Ishita Mukhopadhyay, for adding your diverse perspectives and valuable insights to the deliberation. And of course, we thank all our participants here on Zoom or on Facebook Live for participating and raising pertinent questions. We are grateful if you are watching us later on YouTube or listening to us on various podcasts. I hope that you continue to tune in future to our Gender Gap series and IMPRI #Web Policy Talk. Thank you once again, and I wish you all a very good evening.
Thank you so much to IMPRI, Vibhuti, Dr. Arjun, and Zubia, and to the other panelists. Thank you so much. Okay, I really learned a lot, actually. I learned a lot.